going to give me a presentation today?
Well, I can have a bit of a chat. I don't know how much of a presentation you'd like, but I can have a chat to you about it. Yeah. Do you want to share your screen? Or?
Chat to me about what you wrote on your PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, I thought I'd send it through to you. So have you shared your screen, or do I need to do something here? Or?
Oh, okay. Let's have a look. I can't keep changing. I'm not sure where. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to perhaps do it over. Let me just see if I can. Don Jones. Yeah, I've got to make you the host like we did last time, and that I did that, and then we did lose the.
Do you have to do that? I thought, can't you just enable participant screen sharing?
Actually, I'm looking at your name at the moment. It says you can make host, assign to clubs, allowed to record files, allowed to multi-pin, and so on. So that doesn't. Let's have a look. Maybe.
So is there along that toolbar along the bottom of the screen? Have you got a share screen button there, or?
Yeah. The share screen just takes me to share. But hang on. I'm looking at the up arrow now. Who can share? All participants. There we are.
Yeah.
So who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Doesn't we just put all participants there as well?
There you go. How about that? Can you see that now?
And yeah,
can you see?
I can see that.
Just...
Yep. That's true.
Bear, Lacey, you coming? Not? Okay.
No, the other one, yeah. Thanks. Okay. The stones are.
So you can.
Sorry, Don. I'll be with you now.
Where's the phone?
I think he brought it in earlier. I know Lacey left hers up. Okay. All right. I will be.
Sorry, Don.
Hi. How are you?
Fine,
Okay. Right. Over to you, sir.
Well, after we spoke, I sort of was just trying to get some context clear in my mind, and this is what sort of came up. So whilst I talked here about remote viewing, the spiritual science inquiry, it was really the hypothesis was more about remote viewing being part of a subtle phenomena of the physical. So the first thing that raised in my mind is that there's the physical domain, and then there's the spiritual activity. And also the question about, well, why do we think remote viewing is something worth pursuing? So that were the three sort of, I suppose, hypotheses that I was exploring. And to do that, then basically came down to this idea of mind, body, and energy. So our subtlest energies are involved with activities such as remote viewing. So as we become more aware of our energy fields and how they work, things like remote viewing and long distance communication and all of those sorts of things become possible and available to us. But it's something that we need to understand, because it is quite a subtle use of energies around the physical body. So I've sort of coined it more as a technology, if you like. So, you know, being able to communicate with someone over the vast distances, which people have done for many, many years, is a technology, if you like, you know, the ability to communicate. But obviously the need for us to develop those capabilities has been diminished with the onset of modern technology, such as telephone communications and internet communications and things like that. So I've used the term occult here, but just more to try and convey an idea. So when I say occult, I mean having a certain capability. So in the past, if someone was able to communicate with people over large distances through thought, then quite often that was termed as an occult-like activity or remote viewing and those sorts of things. But really, in the context of what I'm trying to convey here, It's really just simply in a non-judgmental sense of having a certain capability. So when I then look at, okay, occult, word of convenience, and spirituality, well, for me, spirituality is going beyond the physical. So to bring experience which is not physical into your experience. Whereas things like remote viewing and long distance communication and stuff like that, even though it's quite subtle, it is a physical activity. And in that sense, I don't really see it as being a spiritual activity. It's just about having advanced physical capabilities. And as I said, as modern technology becomes, more subtle in its own way, if that's the right terminology, then the need to sort of develop those capabilities also diminishes. I mean, if I want to know what's on your mind, I'll give you a phone call or I'll talk to you via the internet. I don't have to communicate with you via these other options. Whereas the spiritual, in my view, concerns itself with seeing what is the way it is. And that's very much about domains other than, including, but in addition to the physical domain, but less physical and more other domains. So then when you look at occult, word of convenience, and mysticism, for example, so whilst occult might be like a technology, mysticism is like a science. So the essence of the science is to know what the nature of this existence is, which is a lot of what spirituality is about, is trying to know what, why we're here and all of those sorts of elements, which are relevant and less relevant depending on where you are on the spiritual path, I guess. Whereas the use of technology is not necessarily interested in well-being, but I would argue fairly strongly that mysticism and in particular spirituality is about well-being of people. To go down that path is one of pursuing well-being for self and others because of that unity of connection. So the takeaway, which was a bit sort of pointed, but not pointed in one sense, is that, from a spiritual development perspective, the point of life is life itself. And that's not lifestyle, that's the whole issue of life energy and where it comes from, not only in the physical, but in the non-physical domains. And in that context, if you were to simplify things, there's nothing more here than knowing the full dimension and function of life and life energy. So how deeply, how profoundly have you known all there is? And all the rest in comparison, like, for example, remote viewing or long distance communication without the aid of modern technology is, well, I've said it's rubbish, but I think it's a distraction in many, or can be a distraction in many sense. So the longing of life is to touch everything, that which is seen and unseen. Whereas things like this, as I said, it can be a distraction. So the takeaway, eat your greens. End of story.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting thoughts.
So in terms then to probably round it off then, so should we be pursuing this? Well, we can if we want to. If we want to sort of further develop our subtle energies, we can certainly pursue a path of trying to further develop our subtle physical energies. Is it a priority for me? Probably not. No, not even probably not. No, not really a priority for me. Don't have a burning desire to become a remote viewer, because the brief time that I have left, I'd rather allocate to spiritual development activity, I think. So that's sort of where I've sort of landed on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to know what's on your mind, I'll just ask you.
Yeah. it's interesting. Many years ago, I read a book that is talking. A well-known author, just doesn't come to mind at the moment, about before there was technology, the Bushmen in Africa. The men used to go out hunting. They used to go out for sometimes weeks on end and come back when they had found something or hunted something or killed something. And the woman would know a day in advance of what they had killed. They'd communicated with them. Okay, and it was an everyday existence. It was something that just yeah, I've got to get my mind around your beliefs in that presentation. Okay, so yeah, I would need to think a bit more about it. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand you've made your conclusions. But for me, we've lost definitely those abilities because of technology or whatever reason. I think we lost them long before technology came on the scene. And it's, you know, it's an ability of ours. And you see, I linked it rightly or wrongly, okay, as you have rightly wrongly linked it the way you have, that spiritual travel is certainly traveling into the spiritual realms and interacting with people in the spiritual realms and the domains. And a lot of spiritual movements talk about, some of them only talk about astral traveling, the others talk about spiritual traveling. And now, you know, is that a physical thing? Is that remote viewing? And where is the starting point? So, yeah, I'm not sure that necessarily your or mine ideas on it are truth, okay, in that sense. You're ready to throw away anything. We said we'd change the name anyway, but you've called that remote viewing, and you want to throw that out. I think the baby and the bathwater, and call it physical. You're not interested in physical, and it could be, okay. I'm not convinced that it is. Okay. Yeah, do we want to go ahead with it? I would say definitely not, because your heart isn't in it, okay? And, you know, spiritual travel is something that I've been involved with doing for a long time now. And
see, I would say that that's a different thing than remote viewing, though. Very, very different.
yeah, because we've got a name for it, you see. And when you went researching, you researched remote viewing. And so you've got a context of what other people think remote viewing is. And that it has nothing to do with your ability to do anything spiritual. That's your conclusion. And I think perhaps if we called it something else, like spiritual travel, okay, then it would have. So I try hard not to get caught up in a name or somebody else's context or concept. I'm not talking about yours. I'm talking about people who write about these things that we research.
No, but I think the one of the things that came up for me was how you communicate these ideas and the precision you need to put around them, you know. And that's why, you know, when I used the word occult, I was sort of keen to sort of say, well, that's really just about a capability.
Yeah.
So if I have a capability to view remotely and view remotely, for me, was within the context of within the physical domain. So as soon as we were talking about other dimensions, well, for me, then that came into the spiritual domain.
Yeah, although one could argue that we're in a physical cosmos, okay, and so are the other domains, okay, and that could be another discussion, certainly. But yeah, it all started with the pineal gland, where we were talking about it, and the connection with the pineal gland, and is the pineal gland the connection between the physical and the spiritual? Okay, and
well, one of the things which is often reported through people who've practiced activation of that pineal gland is even access to like past lives. Is that the physical domain? For me, not really. Like the physical domain is what's here. Like now.
Yeah, but there are things that are part and parcel of the physical, and you talk about past lives and things like the Akashic records, are they part of the physical or they're not, you see? Because you can access them and, glean information that's possibly very important or makes one very aware of how things have progressed in your own life in the Akashic record. So, yeah, I think I would hesitate to say separate the two things, physical and spiritual. I think it's probably all in one the same thing. Okay. And there are, somewhere in your slides there, that sort of, when I read them myself, when you sent them to me, caught, I can't remember which slide it was, but, and I'm trying to record exactly what it was said, but it linked with me. You were saying something to the effect of, yeah, I can't think of exactly what it is, but what was the difference? Is there any difference, you were saying in one of your slides? And that's what I'm saying now, is there any difference between spiritual and physical? Okay.
Well, I guess what I was trying to do is draw those distinctions, like there's those things like remote viewing and long distance communication, all of those sorts of things, which have been around in mankind for forever, basically.
But spiritual doesn't have to be new, okay?
No, but I'm not talking about spiritual. I'm talking about things like remote viewing and those sorts of specific capabilities, as I've termed them. Then the other distinction I drew was those capabilities and mysticism. Whereas I sort of said, okay, well, occult, those capabilities are like a technology, whereas mysticism is like the science.
Yeah, I couldn't link those two. I still can't. Okay, obviously you had something clear in your mind that you had, but those two, didn't click for me to use.
Well, in my mind, the mysticism, like the science side of it, is really about how do you access the spiritual domains.
Okay, so you're saying that's mysticism. Okay,
that's the science of accessing the spiritual domains.
Yeah,
which by its very nature is one of unity and well-being,
Mm.
whereas some of these capabilities are not necessarily about unity and well-being. They can often be applied through self-interest and harm.
Mm.
So that was the sort of distinction I was trying to draw there. So that when you talk about the spiritual domain, it's really about those dimensions largely beyond the physical.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. I can't connect for me. Maybe it's my
Well,
definition of mysticism.
the fundamental question I pose to you is and I'm not asking for an answer now, is what do you define as spirituality?
Mm. Mm.
How do you describe that? What is that?
It's everything right now. Okay. And we have to live and evolve within the right now. Because of what we said at the last chat, quantum physics has shown us that everything is energy. Okay. So you could say there's no physicality. Okay. It's just a different level of frequency that sort of just evolves within oneself and stretches from within oneself to infinity, and way past God, perhaps, if God's in a physical.
Yeah, but where do you want to take that thought? Like, where do you want to take that?
Where do I want to take
that thought? Like, where does that thought? Where do you want to? What's your exploration of that line of thinking? What does that take it?
Well, it's not.
There is no God.
It's not new in our conversations. Okay, it's certainly not new in our conversations, and fundamentally, what I take out of this conversation now is that you see spiritual and physical as separate. I see spiritual and physical as one. Okay, it's the same thing. Okay, that's why I believe that science is spiritual. Okay,
I don't know that saying that. I don't know that saying that I see it physical and spiritual as separate. I don't, because I haven't said that.
Well, you've implied it in your presentation. You said, "Well, this is, it's like mysticism on one side and the physical on the other side." Okay, you separate the two. Okay, you say, "Well, that's now only remote viewing for the physical," which in itself implies that there's something else then for the spiritual, or that the spiritual is separate.
Well, it is separate in the sense that it's bringing the experience of other dimensions into this domain.
Yeah, but
and the way that you access that in a physical sense is to activate the pineal gland. Yeah.
Well, that's a possibility. Okay, that we've been talking about. Okay, but we exist. Not. You use the word a lot is dimensions. Okay, we live in 6 dimensions. Our physical self. Okay, and in our brain, they're basically there are 6 dimensions that have been addressed. So are the others physical? Yes, they must be. Okay,
but I haven't said that they're not.
No,
because I'll talk about the subtle energies.
Yeah, and I talk about the energies as being everything. Okay, that there isn't a separation. I think that's because you asked, how do I take it? What is it now? And that's how I am at the moment. Is that having or have this I don't know, awareness, belief, or again I'm struggling with words, but is that everything is everything right now, and that we just have a choice of basically good and bad, or evil or satanic and heavenly, and so, and that's our conscious mind that makes those up. So there is that difference or separation that you might then say, well, what you mean is the physical is satanic, okay, and the spiritual is heavenly, okay, and yet they both can be experienced right now, today, here. So, yeah, I don't think there's a separation. I don't think there's a separation. The separation is a mental separation, both from a satanic one and that's manipulated by what we have to learn, I guess, coming here. Have some rooibos. Yeah. You see, you want to find a way of, like, you know, the various religions and philosophies you follow, okay, to do something to become more spiritual. And I feel that, you know, we just do something in our day-to-day 24-hour aspect that is not separate from our day-to-day activity. It just is what it is and what we do. You know, but I guess others believe that you need to sit quietly and meditate. Okay. And that does something. And for decades, I used to believe that. It's, yeah, sort of having different thoughts these days.
I don't know that it's different. I think it's a lot of it's limitations of language, because
Without a doubt, I agree with you there. Yeah.
For me, people who do not choose to pursue a spiritual path are only living half a life. If they're not interested in developing their awareness of the full breadth, depth, height, and width of life, and I don't mean lifestyle, I don't mean,
I know what you mean. I totally agree with you. Okay. So are the people that are consumerists. Okay. They also choosing half a life.
And what I'm saying is I don't, for us to be fully expressed, we need to explore the full breadth and dimension of life. And if we don't do that, then we're a zombie. We're just...
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. Okay. And life being our day-to-day experience when we wake up and go to sleep.
If my priority was the physical domain, then everything in my life would be about enhancing my physical well-being. And that's where there's huge separation.
Yeah.
Because it's about me and others. Whereas in the spiritual domain, it's just one. There is no me, there is no you, it's just one.
Well, that could be just called life, okay? You add the word spiritual to it, I think it could be life. It could be who you are. You know, you take care of other people, you help other people.
And I think the reason that we use the word spiritual is pointing a pathway to explore other dimensions of living. Because if we're conditioned, and we have been, to be focused on the physical, then we need some language of accommodation to point us, and you know, as to what else there is. And then the science, if you want to use that term, to help us discover those fuller dimensions of life and living are things like spiritual practices, like meditation, like, you know, there's a myriad of them which will help propel you down the path and increase your awareness, reduce the obstacles or reduce the blockages to accessing the full breadth and dimensions of life and living, without a doubt.
Okay, good.
From the earliest of human consciousness, you know, there has been this awareness and pursuit of things beyond the gross physical, and I would argue even the subtle physical, into the other dimensions.
Mm.
For me, it's not even a belief, it's an experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the things, the topics, Michael, that we have to explore in detail, in an experiential way, to seek out our first-hand understanding of what is true.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I mean,
Because
you're right. You're right, absolutely right. But somehow,
because if you pose the question, I don't know because I haven't experienced it, but by God, I'm going to turn my mind to finding out whether this is actually true or not.
okay,
That's
you
the
can
spiritual path.
You can let your
That's
mind decide whether it's true or not.
Well, no, it's not your mind decide.
You said I'm going to turn to my mind.
Sorry?
You said I'm going to turn to my mind. Well, that's what I thought you said.
Well, no, the question I posed.
My mind to, I think you said I'm going to turn my mind
so,
to.
Yeah, so the question I'm posing to myself is that, you know, is this it? You know, like, is this as good as it gets? And I don't know. And the way I'm going to discover the answer to that is to pursue a spiritual path, to try and have the experiences, to bring it into my direct experience.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't want to die wondering.
Okay.
For me, that's an absolute tragedy, to die wondering.
But you wouldn't know because you've died, you see. So it wouldn't be a tragedy.
Well, maybe you do know. Maybe you do know. Maybe at the point of death. But I don't want to wait that long. I want to know now.
You be at the point of death, yeah, or after death.
But I'm an impatient bugger. I don't want to wait that long. I want to know now.
No, we don't know for sure, and and then because it's all one anyway. You know, before death, after death, it's all one. It's all one. So, absolutely, experience heaven on earth, okay, or hell on earth, okay, or just experience your life that you're currently living in a way that then searches for, I don't know.
For what is.
Yeah, I'm, you know, I think somehow people probably get to a point where it's the searching has brought maybe a certain, and then, you know, searching is part of the physical, okay? Even if you're searching something that's spiritual, it's still part of the physical. It's something, a physical activity that you're doing, and you're doing things with your brain and your mind and your you know, your thinking and everything and your emotions, but you're still in the physical. Okay, you're doing that from the physical. So I understand that, but now for me, that action that you're bent on doing And I support you for that, but I don't do it, okay? And I won't do it at the moment unless tomorrow something changes for me. And, I, like you do your woodwork, and as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I believe that's where your spirituality lies. You, Don Jones, is there renovating wood and restoring furniture and upcycling things, and that is heaven, okay? I would imagine. So you'll get sort of slowly awarenesses will come to you because you're doing something that is I don't know, it's to me it's like highly spiritual, okay?
Absolutely.
And so you don't need to do anything else. You just need to do your day-to-day work with your furniture. And I do day-to-day work with in the garden and growing and doing microgreens, and probably turn to indoor gardening as well sometime. And I get lost in that. And that to me but it's part of my daily life. It's who I am, okay? I enjoy it. And I get stung like mad, and I get pricked like mad, and, and I suffer immensely. And it makes me think, why do I want to go outside and have this, but I still go out, and because it's just part of my day, okay? So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, historically I used to sit in a chair and I used to meditate, and I did spiritual traveling, okay, and that was great until you ask yourself why, okay, and then you make up a nebulous answer like, well, I'm becoming more spiritual, I'm evolving, okay, why, okay, and are you? Is it not just a truth that, all the gurus and the saviors of the world, they talk about, behavior. I mean, Jesus Christ spoke about, look after your fellow man, okay, and don't kill people. And, they gave a sort of a moral behavior on earth and what you should be doing. And that was really, in a nutshell, what he tried to get civilization to become more civilized, okay? And I guess he's probably failed profusely, as have all the other prophets, okay, if they were actually going to make an influence, okay? But I think they had their time, and, for a few thousand years, it probably did make a better society, or make people accept slavery as being a slave, and that, you mustn't argue, and you must turn the other cheek, and that's fine. And but now I think we've come to a point where we've just got to live to a point where we are proud of ourselves, of living and helping and caring for people and doing things that we enjoy doing. Okay, nothing to do with consumerism or anything like that, but just being part of mankind in a very conscious way, even if you do nothing, okay, to start. But yeah, okay, let me stop there, as I'm going to rattle off. But that's where I am at the moment.
Well, that's good.
It is good. It's good for me. Okay. And
keep doing it.
Sorry?
Keep doing it.
I will. And, and likewise with you. But otherwise you miss the point of possibly the fact that for decades, and when we first started talking, you and I, after we met, we were talking very much about doing things to become more evolved and to raise our consciousness and spirituality, and there were like techniques to do that, and I don't go along anymore with that. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
I think at the simplest level, though, and for me, at the simplest level, is that whatever you're doing, is that if you're applying if you're giving it your full attention, whether it's restoring an old chair or tending a garden or writing or being in a relationship with another wonderful person, or whatever you want to raise as something that you can do, if you're doing that with your full attention, then it can only be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. You see, and I like that you've gone back to this word, not that you left it, is intent. Okay, intention. Okay, because that was what I was trying to get across in my presentation the previous week. Okay, every slide had the word intent in it. Okay, that the focus is on intent. Okay, and that drives you to whatever you want to be. You want to be part and parcel of God, then that must be an intent. Okay,
give it your full intention and attention. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so to me,
because and like there's a million examples that you know and I know, like, you know, if I'm working on something and I'm not giving it my full attention, then I make mistakes and I don't perform very well and blah 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 blah. And the same thing applies, I would argue, to relationships. If you're not giving the person in that relationship, you know, like for me, like, you know, my children and their families, my full attention, then it's a terrible injustice.
Okay, but I like the fact that you put intent and attention together. Okay, because there's one thing about if you separated them and only used attention. Okay, you know, one can, you know, pay full attention to making a lot of money. Okay, for argument's sake. But if you put the two together, your intent is to, let's say, build a relationship with your family, okay, and your children. Now you put your attention on it, okay.
Yeah, and I guess that was the big thing that I struggled with when I turned my attention to things like remote viewing, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
I thought, well, why would I bother?
Yeah. Remote viewing or meditation or whatever, okay. Why? As I put them all together in the same box, because the first thing is your intent, okay, while you're living here and now. My intent in the garden is to have now in the next season, let's say, a beautiful garden, and I want more flowers than I've had historically, and I want to be able to walk in the garden more than having it sort of over there in one place. So that's the intent. Okay, so now I've got an intent. Now I go out there and pay attention to each plant, each individual, want them to grow, encourage them, water them, you know, trim them, you know, clap them if they don't want to flower, you know, and move to but you
see the fundamental question that a Zen monk would ask themselves, and they do, about the garden is who's tending who.
Yeah.
Are you tending the garden, or is the garden tending you?
Yeah, and that's what it should be, because you are one and the same. Okay, you are one and the same. The energy, everything is the same. Okay, and so it's like talking to the birds in the garden as well. It's all one and the same. So I don't want to go, you know, I don't want to go doing gardening in order to become spiritual. You know, that you know, it's almost,
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
100%. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Is I'm not interested in remote viewing to become spiritual. Because for me, it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
No, in fact, it's the opposite. No, it's the opposite. You know. So yeah.
But you also, I find that knowledge is very valuable, and I think it can only ever for eternity have value to us to have knowledge of anything. Okay, knowledge of science.
I would add an extra dimension to that. I think information plus experience gives you wisdom, and the two need to go hand in hand, because if it's just information only, then it's a theory, it's academic. But if you add experience to it, then it becomes wisdom.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. Okay, but I think you can also get to wisdom just through experience. Okay, without sort of going to search for knowledge or information, you just become a wise old man. Okay.
Yeah, well, you probably just don't have as cast as broad a net. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think we now are totally on the same track, and I like that.
Well, we were never on a different track.
No, I agree, because our intent's the same, you see.
Because you just decided to go for a detour in the bush for a little while, that was all.
Yeah.
A flower off the track got your attention. I jest. I'm not.
No, I know you. See, if I just take this moment now in time for me, yeah, I am happy, contented, and I feel that a lot of things are happening that are really positive in a way, and I'm given the opportunity to talk and share things with many people, which didn't before, and not referring to get set up classes and so on, and the type of questions and things, and that the people ask in different classes regardless. Okay, and it gives me an opportunity to just talk to them, and I think that talking again is the energy that then influences anybody anywhere on the planet if you're talking to them. And with everything I say, it has an intent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And in that sense, we all have our own unique pathway, to have that full spiritual experience that you're experiencing now.
Yeah. And physical experience.
Well, I don't know that you can separate.
The life experience. The life
that's
experience.
Right.
The physical,
because that's
spiritual life experience.
Because physical in this domain is part of our life experience. That's right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Moya says that there's no other place in the universe like Earth. Okay, Earth was designed and created as a school for soul, and will continue that way.
I would subscribe to that view, not having explored the whole universe at this point, but what he says rings true. And from what I've read in terms of what scientists say about planet Earth, it's unique. Can you imagine what it must be like if you're coming from a different part of the galaxy and come across this planet Earth, this blue planet that's thriving and heaving with life. Like, just compare the moon, which is beside it, and compare the nearby planets, and all of a sudden this blue thing pops up. I mean, it's incredibly unique, has to.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, just that example you used, you see, I enjoy getting information, truthful information about aliens. Okay, I like to think, now how this information is got is there a lot of different ways, but it's basically through communication with aliens, and not necessarily remote viewing, and not necessarily through channeling and those sort of things, but somehow the aliens are here, and they tell
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And so, perhaps for a long time.
So the information like that interests me, whereas perhaps the most famous artworks, and they don't particularly interest me, and I can appreciate them. So I think we each, we have our own life, our own world, and the information. If we get in information, somehow we're just expanding in some way or other, and without categorizing it as good information or spiritual information, or anything like that.
Exactly. Very good. Good discussion.
Yeah, agree.
I'm glad you agree with me.
I agree with you now.